Without any doubt, the most important health stressor for the honeybee, especially in the northern hemisphere, in Europe and North America, is the parasitic Varroa mite, which has actually been evolved in Southeast Asia on another bee species, but at some point found the honeybee as a new host and is now distributed with it more or less around the world, with the exception more or less of Australia. It's small, 1.6 millimeter more or less, and it's kind of sucking on the body liquid of the honeybee. It weakens the bee, and that makes it more sensitive toward diseases. And probably the worst, it can transmit viruses, like for instance ticks can also transfer human diseases. And since those viruses are, by the activity of the mite, going directly into the body liquid of the honeybees, they get more virulent and more problematic than they were before. So this is the biggest individual threat to honeybee health. So the Varroa mite is perfectly adapted to live in a honeybee colony, a honeybee nest. It feeds on adult bees as well as on the brood, and it's only able to live within a hive. It cannot live outside for a longer time. Yeah, you have it more or less all around the world, but its impact is most severe in Europe, North America, and some other regions. In Africa and parts of South America, the bees are less sensitive to it. So, yeah, it's living on the hemolymph, the body liquid of the bees, which is a very specialized kind of diet. So it can really, especially when you also compare the size of a mite and the size of a bee, I mean, it's quite considerable for the perspective of a bee. It would be like a human is kind of parasitized by a parasite which is as big as a rabbit. Mm-hmm. So it can have nasty impacts to the brood, especially also by transferring these viruses which are deforming the brood then. There are different ways to control the mite, but not really sufficient ways. On one hand is chemical control that can be done, for instance with varroacides, which is acaricides, pesticides developed for controlling the Varroa mite. There is basically 3 to 4 compounds existing, so quite limited range, and they work quite well, but unfortunately are not registered, not available everywhere. And they are also not so easy to apply that every beekeeper just can simply put it into the hive, close the hive, and everything fine. Many of them have to be used out of the breeding season because they may be also having effects on larvae, or they may be better used out of the honey season because they may lead to residues in the honey. So it's a narrow time window mostly. One very recent solution that was developed by Bayer is the so-called Varroa gate, which is a new way of applying varroacides. And this is more or less a plastic strip perforated with holes, which you fit in front of the hive entrance. The holes are just as big as a bee can squeeze itself through, and whenever doing that, it gets dosed with a little dose of the varroacide, which is impregnated in the matrix of this perforated strip. So this one is then being distributed by the bees in the hive, and through that you get a more or less an even distribution there and a very low level, if at all, of residues in beehive matrices. The development of that one is now finalized, and in some country it went on the market this year, 2017. So we hope that will really be a step forward in the control of Varroa. A completely different approach, which is however at the very beginning yet. Instead of having a race of arms with the mite, which is developing a Varroa site, the mite is getting resistant against it, you have to develop a new one and so on. It may be a sustainable solution as well to develop or to breed Varroa resistant mites. Some mites already have now a behavioral pattern which allows them to recognize bee brood cells which are infested by the Varroa mite, and to remove the brood from the cells which is killing the mite. So this is a kind of hygienic behavior which, however, of the European bees only a small fraction is able to do. So by selective breeding of the so-called Varroa sensitive hygiene, it may be possible to have in the end bee colonies which are on their own coping with Varroa. But however, there are some very promising breeding approaches, but this is not yet as far developed that it can really be commercialized and that it really can come to the market in a major extent. But it may be